And this is a perfect example of when it comes time for a fire to come through here, we're trying to get it to where when fire happens, it's not a big deal. Well, when fire happened here, guess what? It wasn't a big deal. And as we'll see and have seen in other parts of this Venado fire, it was a big deal by having the densities that you had and the fuel loading that you had and how that fire behaved. So continuing on with the story of our fuels treatment effectiveness here related to the Venado fire, again, we've mentioned before, but we're trying to get to a desired condition as opposed to an undesired condition of many trees per acre and a heavy fuel loading versus what we've done here is mechanically manipulate the structure of the overstory by cutting it back to more of a historical level of trees per acre, and then piling that slash and getting rid of both the activity fuel and also the dead down fuel component by burning it afterwards. So here it illustrates pretty well that by taking it back to a more historical structure of less than 100 trees per acre, generally speaking, is that the canopy is broken up well enough to where when fire hits this, like we've seen here, it doesn't have enough intensity from the ground fuels or the aerial live trees, those fuels, the standing fuels, to be able to sustain a crown fire. And which is why, again, you see the fire coming out of the tree canopy and dropping to the surface and not having the sort of effects we're seeing across Joaquin Canyon. It is also important to note, we can see that there's when this high severity fire came over the ridge, it had a little bit of wind behind it, and when it hit this, if this was untreated, if this had the amount of trees that were here previous to the mechanical treatment, with this alignment of slope and the wind behind it, this would have kept going at much the same rate and the similar intensities as what you're seeing across the road. Again, furthering the point of mechanical treatments combined with prescribed fire are effective at mitigating the kind of uncharacteristic fire we do not want to see in the pine, to where we can preserve our residual overstory and have a seed source available for these trees to eventually regenerate, and again, maintaining this with fire and keeping it those historical levels. But the big thing is, where we're standing here, the ponderosa pine has a chance to regenerate because we have this intact seed source, to where as we go over to this larger 800 plus acre area that burned at high severity, we've essentially removed the seed source from that area, changed the soil profile, and encourage species like Gamble oak to persist in places like that, which will most likely inhibit conifer trees like ponderosa pine from regenerating in those untreated areas. Okay, so where we're standing now is in an additional treatment unit that is within the Venado fire footprint. Another case of where fuels treatment effectiveness came into play. The unit I'm standing in was cut by the district fire personnel. The treatment was cutting, it was thinning from below and lopping and scattering the tops of material. And a big aspect of this project was we are in close proximity to Forest Road 376, which is a highly traveled road. And with the district folks doing the cutting and the lopping, what we then allowed for before we put any fire in was for the public to come in and utilize the firewood. And as you can see behind me, there isn't one bowl that's really left on the ground, and it kind of illustrates the need in the use of the public for firewood, especially here in northern New Mexico. It's a great byproduct from some of our thinning treatments where this wood is accessible. If we advertise it, folks will come and pick up this wood and utilize it. So a little bit about this treatment. Again, the district cut it. It was lopped. We were allowed the public in to come and remove the fuel wood. And then what we did as far as prescribed fire in this area was you didn't have piles, you had lopped and scattered tops. And we had a line around this unit. And in, I believe this was in springtime, a couple years ago, spring of 2016 possibly, that we came in with a little bit of moisture and snow and basically came through and touched off the treetops. And as you can see, all of the fine needles are out and you can see little skeletons of dead wood but what we essentially did was take the punch out of the fuel loading of what was generated from the cutting. This area still was part of a larger plan to broadcast this entire area. So what we've done was did the cut, did the prescribed fire to take the slash away, and the overall plan was to come back and do a prescribed fire. How this ties into the Venado fire, we're still within that footprint, and essentially by doing this treatment from where we're standing to 376, which is probably a couple hundred yards worth of depth off the road, we already had the main indirect line of 376 cut and burned that also came into play for helping create an indirect fire line around the Venado fire.